Hello and welcome to the in-news series of Drishti IAS. My name is Pooja. Today we are going to discuss the issues with respect to UNSA and other bodies. The issue relates to the lack of stakeholder inclusivity. I am talking about multilateralism. We are going to discuss multilateralism from the prism of India, how India has approached these bodies to provide multilateralism since the Cold War era. We will discuss all about that. So let's begin with the topics that we need to discuss step by step. These are the many topics that we need to discuss. First of all, let us talk about the news. Now, of course, we must know that these topics are important from the perspective of your examination, then only we are discussing it, but more so important from the perspective of GS Mains paper 2nd and 3rd, and from the perspective of preliminary examination, facts are important. So, at UN, Jaishankar reprimands Pak China on terrorism. Reprimands means to scold sternly and lays out India's norms for multilateral reform. It was an open debate at this particular theme. We will talk about that also. What has India laid out? We will discuss that as well. So, first of all, let us talk about multilateralism. When we hear the word multilateralism, it rings into our mind that we are living in a world which is no longer unipolar or bipolar. We are living in a world which is more so developing in nature, which has more imperative goals to achieve, which has one common goal, but we are failing to acknowledge this fact that we have one common goal. And we have moved beyond the world that was earlier known to us. So it can be basically thought of as a collaboration between several countries in pursuit of a common goal. That means multilateralism, if I put it very sternly, to include at least 3 parties, then it is known as multilateralism. To include more than 3 parties, that is what the world needs right now. As Antonio Guterres say, we need a multilateralism where the voice of youth is decisive in shaping our future. It is opposed to one country dictating out the commands or 2 countries trying to shape out the global scenario, but many countries are doing so. First, we need networked multilateralism. That means it should be in such a manner that regional, district-wise, state-wise, nation-wise, there is a network of stakeholders that shape out the future, common future of the world. And it should be inclusive. A constant interaction is needed among the various parties of this networked multilateralism to achieve an inclusive multilateralism. Moving ahead, if we have to talk about the significance of the multilateralism, this term has gained significance since the past 2 to 3 decades. Now see, world is not bipolar anymore. We are not living in a world which consists of USA and Soviet Union. After the breakdown of the Soviet Union, it so happened that other countries started gaining more ground in the world politics, but still their voice was unheard. Many regions are still underrepresented or not represented at all. There is a failure of cliques to maintain peace. Clique is a small body, an elite body where the entrance of the others are prohibited. If we talk about the United Nations Security Council, it is one such clique. The permanent 5, the P5 members do not want to let go of their hegemony to achieve the common goal. They just want their own interests to be achieved first and the rest do not matter. It was so that because of this only we can see Russian-Ukraine war and a war that is going to develop between China and Taiwan. We have to understand the importance of collective responsibility. Multilateralism works on the principle of collective responsibility. That means in order to have a collective outcome of anything, we have to take the collective responsibility for it. This is the significance of multilateralism. What is the need of multilateralism in the sense that how can we talk about our failures so that we can pinpoint them and try to reduce failures and achieve more success? First is, of course, the COVID-19 pandemic that I should say now. This pandemic revealed the institutional limitations of the bodies such as United Nations, WHO and WTO. How? WHO failed to intimate about the dangers that were associated with COVID-19. First, that because of the hegemony of certain nations, they repressed this information and they did not intimate the WHO. That means the WHO was accountable for the healthy world, but it failed. Then United Nations, of course, UNSC I'm talking about here, it failed to maintain peace between Russia and Ukraine, and World Trade Organization failed to improve its supply chains with respect to vaccines. The world has not received as much as supply of vaccines as it could have, because many regions are still not represented very well in these bodies. The UN has proved to be ineffective in reining in the Russia-Ukraine war. China is gaining ground in many regions of the world, specifically its aggressiveness and belligerence in the South China Sea, Indo-Pacific area, and increasingly across the world. It is trying to make the world unipolar once again. And if not unipolar, then it will definitely become bipolar. If we take USA also into account, trade wars between USA and China, after that rhetoric war between USA and China, trying to intrude into each other's supply chains through not very honest means. These are also a part of it. So China is also becoming belligerent. It is trying to, flout the world norms when it comes to international law. These all are the failures, because China, USA, and these are the certain countries which are a member of UNSC, but still they do not acknowledge and respect the international order. Now, what is the misuse of global bodies in the context over here? We are talking about UNSC first. China has blocked the UN listing of a number of Pakistani-based terrorists because Pakistan is the iron brother of China, and India is an unwanted neighbor between India and between China and Pakistan. So India wants to ensure that more heavy oppression of terrorism takes place, but it does not, because China fails to list Sajid Mir, Abdul Rauf, Abdul Makki and Shahid Mahmood in the list of terrorists this year. So China has time and again used its clout in the UNSC to block these members, block these terrorists to become a part of the terrorist list. And because of that, India cannot do anything. See, veto power has been used enormous amount of times. Veto power gives an unparalleled power to a permanent 5 member. Tell me in the comment segment who are the permanent 5 I'm talking about. Permanent 5 member, so that they can show their power in the clique of UNSC. If there is any resolution which has been passed or which is about to be passed in the UNSC, then veto power, by using the veto power, any country can block that resolution, and hence it becomes futile, it becomes useless. So many a times the aggressor in the permanent 5 itself does not let any resolution against it to get passed by using the veto power, and hence the world is in constant boil. Failure of developed nations to deliver on their commitment of climate transition. Here also, as we know, that the amount of money financing that we need to adopt better technologies to fight climate change has not yet been reached or achieved at. So these are the reasons why we need multilateralism. See, since the Cold War, when the world was divided into 2 blocks, India had the policy of non-alignment. That means, or that meant, that India did not want to get associated with either Soviet Union or USA. It wanted to show that neutrality remains for a country like India and other developing and just they were a product of imperialism. These countries got their independence. So they did not want to join any sort of bloc, of which India was the voice. So first, that being neutral and being aloof are 2 different things. If one is neutral, that does not mean that one is aloof with things. So neutrality is there. India joined certain certain groupings, of course, that were multilateral in nature, such as G77 non-aligned movement, Bandung Asian African Conference of 1955, etc. Then through these movements, through these alliances, it wanted to magnify the influence in the international affairs, because it wanted to show that you can exist in the world peacefully without being an ally of any superpower. So India was successful here. Then comes the post-Cold War, when It so happened that USSR was broken down into many nations. Interdependencies for prosperity and security became a question for other countries. Then India, again, with the help of privatization, liberalization and globalization, opened up its economy. So there comes another factor. Apart from the political and geopolitical factor, there comes the economic factor, which helped India to join many other groups such as G20, of which India is the president this year, Quad, SCO, BRICS, RIC, that is Russia, India, China, BIMSTEC, etc. So India, through these groupings, showed how important it is to become a partner of different countries at the same time in order to achieve a common goal. Right now, India has focused in this current summit, focused on call for change in the functional apparatus of the multilateral body. That means how do they function? The basis of their function, they need to be reformed. Specifically, United Nations Security Council. This all was a debate on the current theme, and there is a need for new orientation for reformed multilateral system or norms. This is norms only. So India has laid down the norms so that these norms reflect the contemporary realities. That means the current bodies, they are a product of erstwhile happenings. As time goes by, we need to reform ourselves. If you continue with the erstwhile or an archaic mindset, you are not going to move anywhere. That is what India wants to say. It also stresses on equitable representation. A country, a continent such as Africa is underrepresented or unrepresented in many regions. So, in many regional groupings. So, it is said by India that please be in line with the contemporary and ground realities. Also, there is an increase in the UNSC membership that has meandered aimlessly over the last 3 decades. UNSC has meandered over the last 3 decades. That is a reality. That is the reality. There are divisions within the grouping UNSC, the Permanent Five, which has wreaked havoc for the world as a whole. The real world has changed dramatically. So these are the factors that are guiding India's vision towards a multilateral and multilaterally reformed UNSC. Now, first of all, problems there are with the UNSC. First of all, there is lack of adequate representation. Important countries such as India, Germany, Brazil, South Africa, they are not represented as a permanent member of the expanded UNSC. Then there is also misuse of veto power, which I have already iterated. But again, as we see, as of April 19, 2022, these many countries that are of the Permanent Five, the largest veto has been used by Russia, USSR/Russia, then United States, United Kingdom, China and France. They both have used it 16 times. In totality, 262 times since 1946, the UNSC members, the Permanent Five, have misused their veto power. So that is the problem. When the aggressor of the P5, in the P5, if somebody is an aggressor, they are blocking the resolution against them. Of course, the world is going to be in a boil for a longer period of time. So why this? Why to give such an unparalleled power to these five when the world has changed? This is what India is saying. Because it has become a self-chosen club of the privileged. These five people have come together as we have to personify them. These are five group of people who said that yes, we are privileged. We should rule the world. Let's form a clique. We should not expand it and not be in line with the realities of the world. This is what has happened. Also, it presents a non-democratic group and not allowing the council to make necessary decision whenever it displeases any one of the P5. Because the aim of the UNSC is to maintain peace. If you're using your veto power not to maintain peace, then what is the purpose of it? The purpose gets defeated. Now, there is also geopolitical rivalry within the P5. For example, Russia is against USA. USA is against Russia and China. China is a friend of Russia but is against USA. Because of this, it is also against UK. So these divisions, they are not leading us anywhere. It's a group of countries which have different narratives. So please do not think that right now P5 or UNSC is doing very well. Then there is a threat to state sovereignty. When any country among the P5 is so powerful that it can block any actions against it, then of course there is a huge tendency of that country to do anything it wants to do. I'm not only talking about Russia or China, I'm talking about USA as well. Time and again it has done so. There are certain challenges if we have to talk about reformation of the United Nations Security Council. First is that there is a lack of consensus. Consensus is not building among any of the P5 members when it comes to expanding the UNSC. Why would anybody want to leave their monopoly and let the ground to anybody else? That is, of course, on that particular objective, all the P5 members will agree. Then there is also divisions, as I have already told you, within the P5, and because of that, rivalries play out in the global scenario as well. For example, Pakistan tends to use China's veto power in the UNSC in order to have an upper hand over India, like this only. Okay, so these are the three challenges. Then there is a way forward. First of all, in order to get revamped, there is an importance to welcome the voices across the globe so that the collective good of all can be achieved. Also, global consonance for global governance. Or one thing that we need to understand over here is that a group of elites cannot ever tell you to rule yourselves for your good. They can only do so for their good. So that is important. Urgent correction is needed, that there is a power imbalance, a power mismatch between the P5 and the rest of the world that needs to be plugged. Also, re-energizing intergovernmental negotiation through which any changes in the UN, if it is necessary, is discussed here only. So there is a need to re-energize this forum. Moving ahead now, a very important question that could be asked in your mains examination as well as your interview is, why should India's candidature be accepted? The biggest takeaway from the entire segment could be, India has always used its power very responsibly. India is a nuclear power. India is become one of the world powers, but India has never abused its power. So we can understand that the political setup of India is such, it's a democratic country. It also deserves as a newly independent country. I will say newly, why? Because it hasn't completed 100 years as of yet, as USA has. As a newly independent country in relevance to other countries, India has used its powers very responsibly. It has been the voice of the global south. It has never talked about its own and self-good, but the good and but the collective good of all, specifically the global south, which has been at the receiving end all the time. So India launched the International Solar Alliance in 2015 to reduce the exploitation of fossil fuel and encourage the use of solar energy. And other than that, it has been the front runner in vaccine diplomacy and other important drugs also, with one among the largest individual contributions to the UN peacekeeping force. Tell me why India should not be included. Then India also seeks to ensure that the injustice which has been faced by the global south in so much of time is reduced and mitigated and eliminated. So that is what India wants to do. Now, if we talk about the question, just look at this question, try to answer it. Consider the following statements with respect to United Nations Security Council. It is the only organ of the United Nations that has the power to make decisions that member states are obligated to implement. Each year, the United Nations General Assembly elects 5 non-permanent members for UNSC out of 10 in total for a 2-year term. So we have to select the correct one, okay? And also, let me take the names of those who have answered the last question correctly. The correct answer was refinery products. Akhil, Soumya, Avinash, Prameet, Rupal, Sumit, Abhishek, Sanjay. You all have answered it correctly. Good. Then Akash Deep, Aditya Birla, Mehak, Samotonics, Gomati, Simran, Abhishek Dhyani, Sahil, Tushita, Anuj, Pallavi, Rehan, Adarsh, Puneet, Suchita Pal, Nobodeep, Vinayak, not Vinayak. Vinayak, it's actually C, okay? Srinivas, Raghav, Faizan, Bhargavi, Madhumita and Sagarika. Thank you all for answering this question. And I will take the names of those students who answered it correctly once again in the next segment. Thank you so much for watching and stay updated.